There is a kind of pressure that leaves no marks. It does not come as a threat. It does not feel like manipulation. It arrives quietly, through the people around you, through a room full of strangers, through the quiet feeling that everyone else already agrees. You have felt it. In a meeting where you disagreed but stayed silent. In a conversation where your real opinion never quite came out. In a moment where you looked around, saw everyone moving in the same direction, and moved with them. Not because you truly chose to, but because being different felt too expensive. That feeling has a name, and it is far more powerful than most people want to admit. In 1951, a psychologist named Solomon Asch ran a simple experiment. At least, it looked simple. A person was brought into a room with 7 others. They were shown one line. Then they were shown 3 other lines of different lengths. The task was easy. Say which of the 3 lines matched the original one. But there was a catch. The other 7 people were not real participants. They were actors working with Asch. They had been told in advance to give the wrong answer. One by one, confidently, without hesitation, they named the incorrect line. The real participant always sat near the end. So they had to sit there and listen as 7 people gave the wrong answer as if it were obvious. And then it was their turn. What Asch found was striking. About 75% of participants gave the wrong answer at least once. Across all the trials, around 37% of answers under group pressure were wrong. But when people did the same task alone, without the group, the error rate dropped to less than 1%. The lines had not changed. The correct answer was still right there. But something else had entered the room. When participants were asked afterward, many said they had started to doubt themselves, not just socially. They actually began to wonder if their own eyes were wrong. Others knew the correct answer, but still could not say it out loud. The pressure had not stayed outside them. It had moved inside. One thing is important to mention. All of Asch's original participants were male American college students. Later research found that conformity can vary across cultures, situations, and groups, so the exact numbers do not apply everywhere. But the pattern remains. When a unanimous group points in one direction, individual judgment begins to shift, even when the right answer is obvious. That is what makes the experiment uncomfortable. It is not about intelligence, it is about something much older. The need to belong. The need to not feel alone in what you see. That need is not a weakness, it is a survival instinct. And it runs quietly, whether we notice it or not. The reason social pressure is so hard to notice is that it rarely feels like pressure. It feels like common sense. It feels like reading the room. It feels like a reasonable thought. If everyone around me believes this, maybe they know something I do not. Psychologists call this normative social influence. It means we often agree, not because the evidence is stronger, but because agreement feels safer than disagreement. Agreement brings acceptance, it brings comfort, it removes the fear of being the odd one out. Underneath that is something deeper. The human brain did not evolve alone, it evolved in groups. For most of human history, being rejected by the group was not just uncomfortable, it could be dangerous. So the part of you that notices what others think, that becomes tense when people disapprove, that quietly calculates the cost of saying something different, that part was built to protect you. The world has changed. but that wiring has not. This is why most people do not notice when they are conforming. What they notice is the discomfort of almost not conforming. A small unease, a sudden uncertainty, a quiet feeling that maybe their view was not as solid as they thought. But that uncertainty is not always real doubt. Sometimes it is the pressure pretending to be doubt. In 1974, a political scientist named Elisabeth Noelle-Neumann noticed something that took Asch's experiment out of the laboratory and into everyday life. She called it the spiral of silence. Her idea was simple but disturbing. People are always scanning their environment. They try to sense which opinions are becoming popular and which ones are becoming risky to express. When people feel that their opinion is in the minority or that it might soon become unpopular, they often go quiet. Not because they change their mind, but because being visibly different starts to feel like too much to risk. And this is where it becomes a spiral. When people go quiet, their view becomes less visible. Then others look around and think that view is even more rare. So they go quiet too. The silence spreads. The spiral tightens. Until an opinion that many people privately hold almost disappears from public conversation. Not because it was disproven, not because people stopped believing it, but because silence kept building on silence. This creates a strange distortion. The loudest opinion is not always the most common one. What looks like agreement is not always agreement. Sometimes it is only the result of many people being afraid to speak first. Entire groups of people can believe they are alone in what they think, simply because no one around them is willing to say it out loud. This is what makes social pressure so invisible. It does not only change what one person says, it changes what a society believes about itself. It creates false majorities. It makes certain conversations disappear before they even begin. And it can do all of this without force, without rules, without authority. Just the quiet, shared fear of standing alone. Not all social pressure is harmful. Sometimes adjusting to the people around you is normal. We adapt to the language of our community. We follow certain customs. We learn how to move through the world without creating conflict over every small thing. These small forms of conformity are not the problem. But there is another kind. The kind that reaches deeper. Not just into how you act, but into what you allow yourself to think. When pressure goes that deep, the cost becomes harder to see and harder to recover from. The psychologist Irving Janis called one version of this groupthink. In close groups, the desire to keep harmony can become stronger than the desire to think clearly. Important information gets ignored. Doubts remain unspoken. Better options are never seriously considered. Not because people are stupid, but because the group quietly punishes disagreement. And honest thinking often needs a little friction, but the everyday version is usually quieter than famous historical examples. It is the meeting where a bad decision goes unchallenged because challenging it feels too personal. It is the family where certain things are simply never said. It is the community where fewer and fewer opinions feel safe to express, so slowly that nobody notices when the narrowing began. In all of these cases, the pressure does not feel like pressure. It feels normal. It feels like how things are. And that is exactly where its power comes from. Knowing that social pressure exists does not make a person immune to it. Understanding conformity does not remove the pull of the group. Someone can know every detail of the Asch experiment and still, in a room full of people pointing at the wrong line, begin to doubt what they saw. Knowledge names the feeling. It does not remove it, but knowledge can open a small space. When the discomfort of disagreement appears, when you feel the urge to stay quiet, to go along, to smooth things over, there is a brief moment where a different question becomes possible. Not, what does everyone else think? But, what do I actually believe? That question sounds simple. It is not. Because social pressure mixes two things that are hard to separate: the desire to be accepted and the desire to be honest. For most people, these two things do not feel separate. The pressure blends them together. Going along with the group can start to feel like your own decision. That is why the space between pressure and thought is so small. But that space matters. It is where real judgment begins, and finding it does not mean becoming a contrarian. Contrarianism is not freedom from the group. It is still being controlled by the group, just in the opposite direction. This is something quieter. It is the ability to notice when agreement has been created by pressure rather than thought, and to pause, even briefly, before deciding what to do with that noticing. The pressure that shapes human behavior is not a flaw in the system. In many ways, it is the system. It is built into every social structure, every unspoken rule, every reward that comes from moving with the majority. It cannot be fully removed, and maybe it should not be. Social pressure helps people live together. It creates order, cooperation, shared understanding, and the ability to act as a group. But cohesion and truth are not the same thing. And behind many serious mistakes in human history, both small and large, there is often the same quiet story. People saw the wrong answer clearly and said nothing. After the experiment, Asch asked his participants what would have made it easier to speak up. Most of them gave the same answer: one other person, just one person willing to say what they actually saw. Maybe that is where it starts. Not in dramatic resistance, not in rejecting belonging completely, but in a small decision made again and again. To be the person who names what they see, even when everyone else is pointing somewhere else.